Yep, perfect. So, good morning and welcome to today's class. And today we will be rounding up with our lesson 6. We've been discussing about arrays, how to use array, the different syntax, and the different types of array. I mean, the one-dimensional and the multi-dimensional arrays. We have discussed this so far. And today, I just want to us to go through the last few topics. Then we'll have our lab. I think the lab activity 1. We will do that together in class today. Elements in a range. So we will do that together in class by the end of today. So let's start and talk about it now slow. But before we start today's discussion, please don't forget your Zybox activities, the due date for this lesson 6 Zybox activities on the 3rd. That's tomorrow, Friday. Please don't wait until tomorrow. Don't wait until tomorrow to start your lab exercise. And also, I want to emphasize your Xy labs. The labs are very important. I am saying this as a reminder because I noticed some of you guys actually complete the challenge and participation activity, but don't. A lot of people are not taking the Xy labs. The Xy labs takes about 35% of your total grade. So you can imagine how important it is. You know, I'm not saying the other components of this course is not important, but the Xy labs are very, very important. They are very, very important. They're taking like a larger percentage of your total grades for this course. So before we start this discussion, any question on the previous concept we have introduced in this class? Thumbs up if there's no question and we can, start this discussion. Oh, thank you, guys. So I just want to emphasize in our last class, we talked about the accumulator variable. Why do we need accumulator variable? What did they do in our arrays, in iterating, storing values in our array list? What did they do? Why do we need this kind of variable? These are variables that grow over multiple iteration. They are very important. If we have, just like the example we did in class, the odd and even number. If we had to calculate the even number, then we need what? We need an accumulator variable to calculate the total even number, because this is going to what? To iterate, to grow. It may not grow as well. It depends on the condition, but it allows that specific value to grow over multiple iteration. It's just like we have for our control variable kind of. But this could grow or not over multiple iteration, and they are very, very important to declare and initialize that before starting our loop, before we start our loop, before we jump to our loop, because this helps it involves our loop condition and say, oh, we need to calculate odd number to even numbers. So if the numbers provided by our users are just odd numbers, so the accumulator variable it don't have to grow. And it always, I think it's recommended we start from 0, because we don't know the number of iterations we're talking about here. We don't know the number of time this variable will grow, this variable will increase. So we need to start at that specific value from 0. It's always a good place to start our accumulator variable. So I just want to emphasize that because we talked about that variable in our previous examples, and I think I did not really emphasize why we need them and how important they are in iterating our loops to populate our array. So back on the I think the last topic for this specific lesson, if you go to your Zybooks, you'll have the 6.10, which was talking about enhanced loop for arrays. Why do we need enhanced loop? What are enhanced loop? You know, these are some kind of special loops, and they only work for arrays. And they're not just working for arrays, they only work for arrays that are already populated. That is, arrays that you have initialized the values, arrays that are populated. So if we want to access an entire array list, we want to access an entire array list, and we don't want to keep specifying the different index where this variable, this element of the arrays are located. We can just use what we call the enhanced loop, which loops, it iterates over all the elements, over all the elements in our array. That's just it. It iterates over all the elements in our arrays. So they are different from the traditional for loops, and they are very, very important because they give, less technical depth in terms of the number of code. If you're iterating over, if we are printing everything in our array list, if we want to access everything in our array list, or every variable, every element on our array, we don't have to, go through using index, which will, we have to write multiple line of codes. And the enhanced for loops, it helps to iterate over. So helps to iterate over all the values, That's the point. All the values in our loops. And what is let's go to our lecture note. We have this slide in our lecture notes that is really talking about the enhanced for loop. Why do we use them? How do we use them? And here is the syntax for our enhanced for loop. For, of course, don't forget, for, it's a reserved word in Java. It tells the compiler, hey, we are dealing with loops here. And we have the data type of the array. And this cause here is like the variable name, this is like a nickname we're giving our array to access all the elements. So this is like a nickname we're giving the variable, all the variables in our array. And this allows us to access all the elements, all the values in our array. And it allows us to access all the elements within this array. And it directly follows by what? By column. Don't forget, very, very important with the syntax. And we have the array name itself, So what does this print? It prints the entire elements that we have on our array. And that's just the important, with just 2 lines of code, without having to memorize, without having to think about what is the index, in what specific index is this element stored in memory, is this element located in memory. We can actually, access all the elements, all the values within our array. So let's go back to the Zybooks. I want us to, and this is one of your participation activity, and I want us to copy. You don't have to Team roster. I want us to copy. Oh, first, do we have our IDEs open? Don't forget, on Thursday, we are always coding, mostly coding on Thursday. Thumbs up if you have your IDEs on and ready to start coding. Okay, Blake is ready. Okay, Maddington. Such a small class today. Thumbs up if you're ready and we can, So all I want you to do is to copy this line of code. We have it on our on your Zybox and participation activity for the enhanced loop. And I just want to show you what the enhanced loop says and how we use them. So I want you to paste this, create it. I'm just going to create. Just going to create a Java class and name it let's see, what is the name here? Uh, Team Roster. Okay. And all I have to do is to open my main method. Don't forget, the main method is very important. And here, I also like to write a comment which tells me the purpose to illustrate or to demonstrate enhance follow. So this is we're declaring the first line here. We're declaring what? We are declaring our array variable itself. And we're saying this is a string. This is a string data type array. Don't forget our square bracket, the open and close square bracket follows the data type, which tells, what does it do? It's telling the compiler, hey, wait, we are working with array, not just a reference data type here. We're working with arrays. So we're going to say we are to store, you have to allocate memory for more than one values. So that's what this open and square bracket tells the compiler. And we have the what? We have the name of the array, just like, just like we're naming our variable string itself. So we have the name of the array equals to new, a reserved word and keyword, the data type of the values, and follows by the size. The size. This is the size of the array itself. So we're saying the size of the array here is what? 3 values. We're storing 3 values in this array. And now this next step, we're declaring, declaring the values. We're populating our array. We're populating our array. That's just the word. And we're saying at index 0, we have Mike. At index 1, we have Scotty. And at index 2, we have Tony. These are the values we have put into our array. And now we want, we want to use the enhanced for loop to access, to print all elements, all values in this array, team roster. So what do we do? What is the syntax for the enhanced loop? I don't want to use the different index to print out. I only want to print out because I'm printing out all the elements in this loop. And I want to use an enhanced loop. And the syntax follows as, of course, the for, a reserved keyword telling the compiler, hey, you're going to work with loops here. And it's a for loop. And we're telling the data type, this is the data type of the array. Don't forget. And the player name here is the nickname. That is the variable name. That is the nickname we have given all these values in our array, all the values, all the elements in our array. This is a nickname that it will be pointed to each element in our array, followed by colon. And now we have what? The array name itself, pointing to the specific array we're talking about. Our opening curly braces, don't forget, in our loops, we discussed that, and we're telling print all the values, all the elements in this specific array. So let's run it and see what we have. Perfect. So we already told the compiler to print the statement in a new line. Then we said print current roster. It's just a string we are displaying on our screen. And we are telling the compiler in this other line of code to print all the values in this array. And you can see all these values should be in a new line each. And that's what we have done. And that's what the compiler has displayed in the output. Any question on this? Do we understand how the for loops work? Why we use the for loops? The enhanced for loop, rather. So this automatically, you don't need the index. You're working with just small lines of code here. And this is only used when we are printing. It's more recommended to use when we're printing the entire array element. If we have to print the entire array element, the entire values in our array, we can use the enhanced for loop to access and print this array without having to write so many lines of code, without having to keep in mind the different index or the different position of the values within the arrays. Any question on this? Thumbs up if you understand. Thumbs up if you understand this concepts of enhanced loop, why we need them, how we use them. So they're very, very important if we have to access the entire elements in the loop. So we don't have to write each or memorize or think about each of the index. All we have to do it because the compiler automatically knows the index and just print out or an access, that's the word, an access all the elements within the specific array. Okay, and that's exactly what this PowerPoint slide is saying, that we can use and enhance. This is a special kind of loop, for loops, that helps us to access. It is only appropriate when processing all, that's the word, when processing all array elements from top to bottom. So from the lowest index to the highest index. So when we're processing, when we have to access, when we have to work with all the elements within our array in that specific, from the lowest index, that's from index 0 until the highest index in our array. So if no question, I think I want us to let's go to our Zybox and let's talk about one of the labs. So I just want us to go through one of the labs activities together for lesson 6. And I want you to code along with me. So what is the problem we're solving here? What is the problem? Write a program that first gets a list of integers from input. What is the statement saying? It is saying this is an interactive program. This will grab values from what? From the user. This we have to input some values using our keyboard. That's the first line. So that's the first requirement here. We have to import, we have to access this scanner class. We have to get values from our users. It has to be user defined, user given values. The array will be populated by the users. And it is also an integer. The array we're saving, we store in memory here is an integer data type. So we understand these two concepts here. So the next line instructions we're given is that the input begins with an integer indicating the number of integers that follows. So we're saying the inputs, whatever the user is giving us, whatever values the user is generating or populating to this array, the first value indicates the number of integers that follow. So in this sense, we have 5 as the first value. So it indicates that 5 integer values needs to follow. Do we understand this until this level? Thumbs up if you get this this instruction until the second statement here. Just want to be sure you guys are following. Thumbs up if you understand this. We are working with integer data type, which is an array. We're getting this value from our users. The users are populating this array. And the first value the user gives determine the number of integers that follows it. So in this example, for instance, we have 5 as the first value. It shows that the number of integer that has to follow the first value presented by the user must be 5 values, and they have to be integer values. So what is the next statement? Assuming that this list will always contain fewer than 20. So this is another kind of, information here telling us that the first value, our first value here must be less than 20, must, contain fewer than 20 integer. So the first value could be between 5 and 9. It must be less than 20 integers. It must be less than. The first values we're given must be less than 20 here. So what's this other instructions we're giving? That list is followed by another. So we're asking the user to also do what? So must be followed by another 2 more integers. What is these 2 more integers going to do? They're going to represent the lower and the upper bound of the range. So after the first value, which is 5, we have 205, 51, 0, 200, and 300. And now we're telling this has to follow, the user needs to generate a kind of bound, which is like some kind of restriction, saying the lower band has to be 0 and the upper band has to be 50. So what do we want to the computer? So what is the problem here? So what do we want to compute? Your program should output all integers from the list that are within the range, inclusive of the bounds. So this is what we want to do. This instruction just gave us the exact problem we want to solve here. We want to print. We want to output. So what are we printing? We want to print the integers within the bound, only the integer within the lower and the upper bound, inclusive of these bounds together. So we want to, if our bound is 0, the lower one is 0 and the upper one is 50, we are only printing integers within 0 and 50. So we're only printing integers like 25 is within 0 and 50. 51 is outside. It's outside the bound. It's higher than the upper bound. So a compiler will not print 51. So 0, of course, because we said the bounds are inclusive. So 0 is inclusive. We have to print 0. 200 is actually outside. It is outside. So a compiler will tell him, hey, we're not to print this. But 33 is within the bound. So where we had to print 33. For code simplicity, let's finish up the instructions that we have to write our program. So for code simplicity, follow each output integer by a comma. So we're telling, we're giving more description of what the output should look like. Follows, the output should be following each integer with what? With a comma. And even the last one. So even the 33 should be followed with a comma. Then output ends with new line. So this is another line of code. So we'll see, how should we do this? So are we ready to start? Do we understand the problem at hand? Don't forget, in our lesson 2, we talk about the problem, the life cycle of a program, and we talk about problem solving. We have to understand, we have to specify the requirement. We have to understand what we're providing, what solution are we building before we start implementation, which is writing our code. Because they are different, there are thousands of ways we can do this. There are thousands, but once we specify the requirements, we analyze the requirements, we understand the problem at hand. Oh, I think this problem, this specific approach work better for this kind of problem. And so one approach will be more better than the other. So that's why we have to first, we don't just jump into writing, into implementation of the solution. We have to design our solution first. We have to understand the problem and specify those requirements. What are the things we need to do? What do we not need to do? And we have to write based on the specification, implement this code, then maintain. That's when we go back to say, hey, is this problem, is this solution solving the given problem? So what is the problem here? We have to print a set of integers that has an upper band and lower band. And we have to save this set of integer in an array. Then access this array to print the upper and the lower band. Any question on this problem? Anything you don't understand? Thumbs up if you understand this, and we can start building our solution to solve this problem. Thank you. So I believe we have our IDEs opened and we are ready. So let's say, what do I have to do? I have to. So what do I want to do here? The first thing I do is to create a new Java class. And I want to call this, and you can always name it anything, but for the purpose of, I'm gonna call it, what are we doing? What are we doing? I'm gonna call it bounds. Boundary. Because this gives me the purpose. Close it, close it. So what are we to do? Don't forget, we already specified our requirements. And one of the requirements we specify is that we are grabbing these values from the user. The user has to provide us those values we're saving in memory. So in that, we need to import our scanner class. Very important. Because we're going to use some method that helps us to grab those values. And I do this by adding comments. This allows me, anybody, to pick up my code and understand what I've done. So here is I'm accessing the scanner class. Accessing. So with this line of code, I'm accessing the scanner class. And after that, what do I have to do? I've accessed my scanner class. I have my then I need to open my main method. Don't forget. And I know this is the end of my main in of my class. So how do we grab these values from the user? Don't forget, we already said a scanner class is an instance class. Hence, we need to create an object to what? To access the method in this class. So what are we to do? We have to create a scanner objects from user's keyboard. And that's always scanner. And the name of your object, this is user defined. You could name it anything. I decided to name my own CS. You could name it scan. You could name it whatever works for you. And new, which is always pertaining when we're declaring our instant objects. And system.in, what does the system.in tells my compiler? It tells my compiler, hey, this value will be grabbed from the keyboard. So the next, I need to read the number of integers in the list. So here, what am I saying? I am reading the integers, the values, you know, the values my user provide. I am storing it in a specific container. And this container is called int10. It uses the find. You can always name your variable anything. I'm just picking small and easier. And this is always the method, you know, that helps us to grab those values and save this value, store this value in a specific container. It holds the value. So the next thing I like to do is now to create my array. I'm creating my array to store the numbers. So I am creating an array that I want to populate the user given numbers to. And how, don't forget how my square brackets tells that this tells the compiler, hey, we are working with what here? We are working with an array. And I'm saying new int. You can use n here. I can use 5. Do I prefer to use n? Should, you know, the user provides more than 5 variables because the instruction did not just restrict us to 5 values rather. The instruction said it has to be fewer than 20 integers. So the n is appropriate. However, if you use 5 here, it's still going to run if you're only populating our array with 5 values. So you mean the first number, just like the example we have, is just 5 values. But here, this is the what? The size, the end size is grabbing the size from the number of values the user populates or the user enter in our keyboard. So numbers hold exactly n integers because it could be more than 5 integers. Now you can see my error because I have missed the equals operator here. So Now we have our array where we want to what, where we want to store, where we want to populate whatever values the user gives us or the user is inputting to our computer. So what do we have to do next? What do we have to do next? We have to read the integers into the array. We have created the array. We have created this array and we need to populate. So how do we populate our arrays when we are not sure of the values? We're not sure of the values. We use what? The traditional for loop. We use a traditional, not the enhanced for loop here. So store each integer at the correct index. So because we're not sure of those values, the values are coming from the users. So it is advisable to use what? The traditional for loop here as against the enhanced for loop. If we are sure of the values, if arrays is already populated and we're sure of the number of values the user will be given, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 6, maybe it's 7, up to 19, we can use our what? And we are printing the entire list. We can use what we call our enhanced for loop. So what happens here? Don't forget our syntax of for loops. We'll say int high. Our high here is our what? Is our control variable equals to 0. And we're saying when high is less than number. So this is our Boolean expression. What should happen? We'll say that. And don't forget, we're modifying our high here. Very, very important. So what should happen? We say number. So we're storing number to the different numbers because that's the name, numbers, onto the different index here. So we're storing the different, the values to their index. This this could be solved using different method. You do not have to. Okay, so this is always the I like to add some in the fall. Any question until this point? Thumbs up if you understand what we have done until this point and you're following along with the code. Let me see how many people are following. And thank you. So now we have stored our values, the user's values, in a specific array called numbers. That's the name of the array we've created, and we have stored those values in this specific numbers array. So what are we going? Don't forget the second instructions we're giving. We have to read the lower and upper bound. That was the second instructions, part of the instructions we give. So we need to declare what is our lower bound? What is our lower? It's coming, the lower and upper bound is also coming from the user. And we do the same thing for the upper. So the compiler grabs this value It grabs this value from the users, that's from the keyboard. Um, So now we want to do what? We want to print between our upper band and the low, only values between our upper band and the lower band. We can do this using the traditional for loops. But for the purpose of the class demonstration, and because we talked about enhanced loop today, I want to use an enhanced loop to print this range of numbers. But the recommended approach here is to use the traditional loop. But of course, we can always use the enhanced loop too, with some level of tricks and a fewer code as well within the range. So what does this tells the syntax for this loop is int. That's the data type of the array. So we need a variable name. That's a nickname we're giving all values on our array list. That's the nickname. So I'm gonna put this as num. You can use anything. Followed by my colon. That's very important. And my array name itself. So this is another enhanced for loop. So what am I to do here? Because I am not printing. Because I am not printing. For enhanced for loop is mostly used when you're printing all, it's highly recommended when you're printing all elements in a loop. However, I am not printing all the elements in my loop, in my array rather. I'm not printing, I'm only printing elements, values that falls between what? Between my upper and lower bounds. So I need to use another approach here. And here, what am I doing? I'm calling my if. I'm using my if statement. And here I'm using my conditional statement. And I'm saying if no, which is the value, how I'm accessing, how I am locating each of the values. Using the enhanced loop, I am locating each of the values directly using the values nickname. Unlike in the traditional for loop, where I am locating and accessing the array using the index, the location of the value, and not the value itself. Here, I'm able to use my as loop because I am accessing the value itself and not the location of this value. So I'm saying if no, that's the nickname of each of the elements on my array, is what is greater or equals to lower. And don't forget what happens when we use these logical operators. And the two condition must be true. The two condition must be true. And I'm saying norm is lesser or equals to the upper bound. Why am I using less or equals to? Because the lower band, the value for the lower band and the upper band are inclusive. If they are not inclusive, all I have to do is to use less than or greater than. But here, I need to accommodate the value itself, the lower and the uppercase value itself in my print statement. So I'm using less than or equals to or greater than or equals to. So what should happen? What should happen? What should happen? So I want my computer to print out. This is the purpose. I want it to print Num, that is the value, the element itself that meets this condition, not the index. I'm concatenating this because one of the instructions we're given, it must be followed. Each of these values must be followed by what? By a comma. So in between that, I'm putting my comma, terminating my statement. And this is a if statements. That's our end of my if statement, the end of my enhanced loop. And we have one last instruction that we were given. The last instruction is that each must add the values the user is generating, the upper and lower values the user is further giving us, as well as the prints of the values within this array that are within the upper and lower limits must be starting in a new line. So what do I just have to format this. And how do I format that and say system.have those prints? And I'm saying a new line. So I'm telling the compiler, all print statements should be what? A new line. So print system dot print. So let's run and see what we have. I want to do this. So now let's put the exact values that we had. The first variable, the first value 5. What does 5 tells my program? It tells the program, it tells the compiler the integers that should follow should be 5 integers, 5 different integers. So I'm saying 25, the first one, 51. These are my include. 0, 233. So what next? I need to also feed, I need to input what is my upper and the lower band. So what is my lower band? The lower band is 0 and the upper is 50. So I'm telling the compiler to prompt. And you can see the result. This goes back to say, is 5. 5 is excluded because this is what we have told the compiler. These are the only elements saved in this array. And 25 is at index 0, 51 at index 1, 0 at index 2, 200 at index 3, and 33 at index 4. So we have our hen as 5. In our upper band, 50, our lower band is 0. So this is going back to the element in our array and say and check. Hey, is 25 within 0 and 50? Yes, so print. Is 51 within 0 and 50? No, don't print. Because that's what the if statement here is doing. The two condition has to be met. Is 0 between 0 and 50? Yes, because we said is less than or equals to or greater than or equals to. Then it prints. Is 200 within this range, 50, 0 and 50? No, it doesn't print. And it's 33 between this range? Yes, and the compiler prints it. Any question? Thumbs up if you understand this code. Any question? Thumbs up if you get this point. You can work with, you can see you can use enhanced loop. Our programs getting complicated. It gets getting complex, and that's the purpose of this class, to introduce this concept one after the other and see how can we use this concept together to solve a specific problem, programming problem. So if no question, And this will be the end of our lesson 6. If I'm correct, yes, that's the end of lesson 6. And that's the end of lesson 6 array. And your assignments for lesson 6 is due tomorrow. Please submit your assignments. And very, very important, your lab activities. Your lab activities is essential, as well as your participation activities and your challenge activities. So we have solved together in class today the elements in a range between 0 and 50. So you have other 2 labs that are required, and you have optional labs. I will definitely encourage you to take advantage of these optional labs to learn more on the concept, to build more on the concept we have learned in class. And from next week, we will start discussing about user-defined method, another interesting concept in our object-oriented programming language. So, user-defined methods. Let's see, we've been writing within our main methods from lesson 1 until lesson 6, and in lesson 7, we will introduce other methods that are user-defined methods. Okay, any question? Any question generally on lesson 6 from array, unidirectional array, multi-dimensional array, how to access our array, the different ways we can declare our array. We can declare and initialize at the same point. We can declare and initialize with the size, the size of the array when we are not sure of the values within this array. But when we're sure, we can populate, different way we can populate our array. We also talk about, the 2-dimensional array, and today we talk about the enhanced for loops, specifically for arrays, specifically used in processing our arrays. We talked about the traditional for loops, how we can use the traditional for loops to populate our arrays when we're not sure, or when we want to get the values. We want to get the values from the user, just like in this example, in this challenge activities we solve together. Any question? So, if a question, I think we can end to this class. And I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good week.
You too.